Susan? Are you muted? Are you muted? All right. Well, for those of you who are online with us already, welcome. Science on Tap YouTube edition. We're going to give it just another minute or two to let people file in virtually in the virtual world. All right, welcome to Science on Tap YouTube edition. We're here virtual from Trout Lake Station. Thanks for coming. My name is Carol Warden. Science on Tap is an example of the Wisconsin idea, which was conceived in 1905, that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state. And we'd like to thank our partners in Science on Tap. That includes Monaco Public Library, the Lakeland Badger chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, UW Kemp Natural Resources Station, UW Trout Lake Station, Oak Fire Pizza, and WXPR, our local radio station, public radio station here in northern Wisconsin. And Science on Tap is funded through a grant through the Brittingham Foundation at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So we have two ways to watch, right here on YouTube, like all of you are right now. And when we get to the question and comment time, you can use the comment box in YouTube to place your questions. And there's also a link on our website that links us to this YouTube page as well. Or you can watch at a later time. All of these are recorded and put on our website and archived. So you can go to our website, scienceontapmanaqua.org, and check out these videos at any time after the recording. Our next event is on March 2nd, exactly 1 month from today. And that too will be a virtual event with hopes of going back to in-person events soon after that. So we'll cross our fingers that that can work out. Before I introduce our speaker tonight, can everyone see where the comment box is on YouTube? And you can use that to let us know where you are tuning in from tonight. You want to take a moment to do that quick? And any tech problems that you have during this presentation, you can use that same comment box to let us know if you see anything wrong with that. So we've got some viewers from Boulder Junction. Fancy that. Glad to see it. And I'm sure throughout the state and maybe even the Midwest as well. All right, so tonight we have Teresa Barone, and she's here to tell us about maple syrup production in Wisconsin. Teresa graduated from UW Green Bay with a bachelor's degree in human development and psychology. And she's been making maple syrup since she was a child at her family's business called Maple Sweet Dairy in De Pere, Wisconsin. Teresa and her husband, John, along with their two children, Justin and Alicia, and her large family tap 1,200 taps on tubing and buckets on their property. They also have 5 solar power vacuum systems, and they cook on a wood-fired evaporator and finish on a propane finish pan. And besides making maple syrup, they make many different value-added products, including maple cream, maple candy, cinnamon maple syrup, bourbon maple syrup, honey maple syrup, and maple cotton candy. In 2018, Teresa and her high school friend joined forces with their honey and maple syrup to create a new added adventure called Maple Buzz. They've expanded to 7 highs and continue to develop their new products using their honey and maple syrup. They have expanded their products to maple coffee, honey coffee, bourbon barrel aged, maple balsamic, honey maple vinaigrettes, and a couple new products to debut in 2022. In 2015, Teresa was hired as executive director for the Wisconsin Maple Syrup Producers Association. In her position there, she takes care of planning their association events, their membership, working with the state on maple issues, going around the state presenting educational seminars, working at the Wisconsin State Fair, editing the Wisconsin Maple News, and attending many maple events throughout the year. She also helped to create a teacher's packet that has videos and hands-on kits to educate students around Wisconsin about maple syrup production. So, per our tradition here at Science on Tap, I have a trivia story for you. So, Teresa's love of maple syrup started at a very young age, from waiting to tap trees in the spring with the brace and bit, hanging pails on trees, emptying the pails of sap, and carrying those pails up the hill to their collection tank to drive it to the sugar house to unload. She was all in for all of these. However, their operation was not necessarily ideal for collecting pails with the hills and the rock ledge on their 160 acres of land. It seemed no matter how many times Teresa would climb up that hill with 2 pails of sap, some would spill down her leg and she would get soaked, or the buckets would tumble down the hill after she lost her footing. Still, she would get up, look what she had left in the bucket, get it to the collection tank, and move on. She found herself quite a few times on the bottom of that hill with 2 empty pails and soaking wet. With unending stories like this in Teresa's family, they ended up with a slogan. So our trivia question tonight is, which of these is their sugar house slogan? A, it's all downhill from here. B, go with the flow. Or C, sweet, sappy, and happy. So, Teresa, will you fill us in on which of those is correct? A, it's all downhill from here. B, go with the flow. Or C, sweet, sappy, and happy.
The answer to that question is B, go with the flow. Having a big family and an operation that was never the ideal operation with all those hills and valleys, you'd see that sap at the bottom of the hill, or when you're at the top of the hill, the pail's at the bottom and soaking wet, either aspect, and you just got up and went to that next tree and collected the sap.
Well, thanks, Teresa, and we will turn it over to you for a presentation, and then we'll have question and answer after that.
Thank you. Again, yes, I am Teresa Barone. I'm the executive director of the Wisconsin Maple Syrup Producers Association, and I'm also a maple syrup producer in De Pere, Wisconsin. Yeah, we have 1,200 taps. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the Wisconsin maple industry, about where it began, how to tap, a beginner 101, the nutrient value of maple syrup, and then a little bit about value-added products of maple syrup. So, Wisconsin maple syrup story. Who discovered maple syrup? How was it first used? What are the roots of Wisconsin maple production? And where are we today? So, the Wisconsin maple syrup story started a long time ago with Native American tribes. If you look at this map, you can see the tribes on the map, and upper Wisconsin seemed to be the larger area for maple syrup production, and still is today. Sugar maple trees were trees are almost unlimited in original forests, the manufacture of sugar was one of the principal Native American industries. And we'll be talking about why it was sugar instead of just maple syrup in a little bit. So it started out with Native American production. Pre-European production methods, if you see in the picture, they used the birch or the elm bark from the trees as collection pots, and then they had notches in the trees. They used hot stones to boil the sap to sugar. They produced large quantities of sugar and packed it in birch bark vessels and buried them underground. Makes you wonder why they did sugar again instead of syrup. It kept in good condition for further use and trade. European production in the 1600 iron trade pots were used. Observers in the 1700s reported a band of 1,500 Menominee Indians who made 90 tons of sugar. An average person consumed 120 pounds of sugar per individual per year. Being said, this was maple sugar. Again, maple sugar often was used in the place of salt for seasoning, and it provided energy in lean times. Here's some pictures of settlers when they came into Wisconsin into the 1840s. You'll notice you can see the horses and the wood collection tanks. Some people still today use horses. They train those horses to go to the trees to collect. If you look in the bottom picture, they're boiling on one of those iron pots over a wood fire. And you notice in the top picture, there's a lot of people in that picture, as hence today, it takes a lot of people to help out and in your operation to make maple syrup. Okay. Why did the settlers use maple? Most all sap was cooked into, as I said, all the way to solid sugar. This was true until 1900 and the advent of sealed jar lids. The source of sugar for pioneers, Daniel Boone, made over 300 pounds of sugar each spring when living along the Missouri. Trade items on exploring up the Missouri as well as family use. And as I talked, the early settler, the major source of sugar on the frontier was cane sugar, was because cane sugar was expensive and difficult to get. And also with this maple sugar, they could bury it underground where it kept it cold and it kept it perishable. So that's just a little history of where it began. So today in Wisconsin, the production by state today, I should say, Canada is of course above any state. There's over 5 million pounds of syrup made. So where does Wisconsin rank? Wisconsin ranks 4th in the nation in maple syrup production, behind Vermont, New York, Maine, and then Pennsylvania. And I think Wisconsin could maybe beat out Maine if all the hobbyist producers said that they produce maple syrup as well. Wisconsin maple syrup production in 2021. This is just took from the NASS census. It's only the people that report from NASS. That's where the data is from. And like I said, this data, if everybody reported, this data would be higher. So in 2021, there are 850,000 taps throughout Wisconsin. The yield per tap was 0.340 gallons. State production was 300,000 gallons of maple syrup. The average price per gallon was $29.10. It went down from in 2020, the average price per gallon. And in 2017, Wisconsin syrup generated $7.5 million in sales. Why this is a 2017 stats, because they will be doing the census this year and they will be updating that stat. And next question is, what trees can I tap? Well, you think maple syrup, we would think that you would tap a maple tree, of course, but that's a question asked by many. This beautiful picture here is the star of our show, the amazing maple tree, the Acer saccharum, 148 other varieties. Saccharum family includes the sugar canes. It's a unique among tree for its highly developed sap flow mechanism. The largest maple tree is 128 inches in diameter out in Connecticut. So tree identification. It is easiest to identify your trees in fall because, of course, the maple leaves on the tree. And so I suggest that people go out in the fall and you can mark your trees with a suitable method. When I say with a suitable method, you don't want to necessarily be pounding a nail in the tree. Tie a rope around it or take a chalk marker. So there are 4 kinds of maple trees: the sugar maple, the black maple, the red maple, and the silver maple. We talk a lot about sugar maples. It is the Wisconsin state tree, and it usually has the higher sugar content in the sap than the other maple trees. But you can tap all 4 of those maple trees. At our operation in De Pere, we have sugar, red, and silver maples. We don't have any black maples, but there are black maples in the state of Wisconsin. And when it comes to tapping them, you mix all that sap together. You don't separate the sap from that. I know many times I get asked, can you tap a box elder tree? Because that is in the maple family. Yes, you can. It tends to give your maple syrup a little bit bitter tasting compared to the other maple trees. Okay. Why is sap sweet? And what is the purpose of sap? Trees conduct photosynthesis throughout the summer that creates starch. Trees store that starch in the root system. The larger the tree, of course, the more photosynthesis. Late fall and winter, the starch is converted to sugar, which protects the tree from the cold. The sugar content, which we will be talking about in a little bit, varies from tree to tree. So when do we tap? Usually in Wisconsin here, we tap the middle of February to the middle of April, depending where you are located in your local weather conditions. Here in De Pere, we've been tapping usually the 3rd to the 4th week of February. Down near Madison, they're usually around that middle of February. And up north, it's usually towards the beginning of March. A lot of your tapping depends on what tapping method you're using too. Tubing systems are a little bit more forgiving than tapping your bucket system with your taps. When people ask, when should you tap? Well, above 32 degrees during the day and it falls below freezing at night. That is when your tree will start producing your sap. We try not to, at our sugar bush with our pails, tap under when the temperature is 24 degrees. So here's kind of a picture of some trees. So what happens at the night with the cold, sap leaves, sap leaves the roots and travels up. During the day, sap goes back down due to the gravity and the pressure in the tree. The lower the atmospheric pressure, the better the sap run. So you can see on the picture to the left, the vacuum, and the tree is under a vacuum. And then as it gets at above 32 degrees, it's like the tree is under pressure. The water absorbs while it's cold, and then the sap runs out as it warms up. What influences sap flow? Length of the freeze and thaw process, wind, and then the importance of wind barrier, the atmospheric pressure, climate of a region, snow coverage, and frost, previous year's precipitation level. It has been linked that if the year before there isn't as much precipitation, that your sap yield will be less the following year. In the state of Wisconsin in 2012, we had one of the worst seasons on record, where most people, the season lasts less than a week. How many taps per tree? Tree diameter should be measured at breast height. So when I say that, it means we always make a joke about going to hug that tree. That's where your breast height is, where you'd put your arms around the tree. 10 inches in diameter at breast height, you'd put 1 tap. 20 inches diameters, you would put 2 taps. No more than 4 taps on a tree. So these are some drill bit and a hammer. Hopefully you guys can see this. This is how, when I was younger, we started tapping the old brace and bit system. Big thing about this is you need to make sure you have a sharp bit on the end. When our drill runs out of battery, we use that. So you'll see a drill bit in the center and then a hammer on the end. Can you use any drill bit? Yes, they make a 5/16 and a 7/16, well, 3/16, 5/16, 7/16 tapping taps. So it depends your tapping size you're going to use. The only thing different, the ones that they make special for the maple industry, your tree hole comes out cleaner. Where to tap? You always want to locate last year's tap hole. Always stay at least 3 inches away from old tap holes in a star pattern. Our joke in our sugar house is take your hand, put your hand at that last tap hole and at least stay a hand away from your last tap hole. Tap around the tree, the whole diameter of the tree, not just on the south side. That's an old wise tale where it'll warm up quicker on the south side, that you want to tap there for more sap production. No, you should tap on all sides of the tree. A tree tap, each tap should average 10 gallons of sap per year on a good year. 10 gallons of sap would mean you'd get 1 gallon of syrup per tap hole. When you tap, you want to tap at a 5 to 10 degree angle, just a slight angle. Tapping down, ice will always push back the spout, tapping up too much. So tapping guidelines. You want to tap 1 3/4 inches to 2 inches into the tree. Many years ago, we tap as far as you could go in. You're thinking you'd get more sap. No, your sap is actually made in the first 3 layers of the tree. Hit the spouts with the right strength with your wrist. Use an 8-ounce hammer. Watch for the change of sound and stop hitting. You'll hear it kind of sound hollow. That's when you know your spigot is in tight. Don't hit too hard. Your tree could split. Too soft and the spout might pull out, or you will see around the spout it leaking. Can you go back in and pound that spout in? Yes, you can go back in and pound that spout in. Here's some pictures of pails, bags, and tubing. You'll see this pails in here. This is an old picture. Wisconsin is going away from using galvanized pails. They're going more to using these plastic green pails, and they make blue pails. And you'll see this bag system here. It's really a simple base bag system with a PVC pipe and your bag hung to that. And then on the bottom picture is a picture of tubing. Best collection method. Choose between pails, sap/sap sacks, and tubing. Pails, sap sacks, advantages: they're easier to put out, easier to manage your woods out of the season, more of a historic look with the pails, ability to see production of each tree. Disadvantages: more expensive for tap hole, requires more labor, damage to sap sacks by animals. One rule of thumb with sap sacks or with tubing, if you're putting your sap sacks out, make sure you put like a plastic glove on your hands. It keeps the animals from coming to the tree and coming to the bags and coming for your oil on your hands. It helps with them chewing on those bags. Tubing. Advantages, typically it's cheaper per tap. It doesn't require much labor. The ability to tap on steep terrain, ability to centralize a group of trees, better production per tap. Disadvantages, more maintenance, damage from animals, trees, etc. Tubing can get in the way when doing things out of season. Example, when you're cutting wood or deer hunting. It's not as nostalgic. It's more difficult to install than pails. Here's a picture of tubing out in our woods. This is a nice little holder that makes it easier when you're rolling out your tubing. This here is in our gravity fed system. When I mean by gravity fed, it slopes all down to a collection tank at the bottom of the woods. There's no vacuum on the system. Collection. It is best to collect sap every day so sap stays fresh. Use clean food grade containers. If you look at this picture, this is a picture of a stainless steel bulk tank. This is a solar vacuum. In our woods, we do not have the ability for electricity. So we have solar vacuums that actually power our battery to power our pump, used as a normal vacuum, and it helps create more sap flow. Okay. Processing maple sap into syrup. If you look in this picture here, this is maple sap at a 2% average, and this is the average usually throughout the year. If your sap gets below 1%, they say it's not good to cook it because you'll use more energy cooking that in time. As the sap starts lowering in sap content or in sugar content, it usually indicates it's getting to be the end of the year. But this last year, sugar content started out low for many producers, and it actually increased through the year and then went back down. Usually you'll get that higher percentage, like I said, at the beginning of the year. On average, usually a lawn tree will produce more sugar content in the sap than a tree out in the woods because they're not fighting with other trees. Maple sap and syrup use the Brix scale of measurement, the percentage of sugar suspended in liquid. Or I'm sure everybody that is involved with maple has heard of the Jones rule of 86. 86 divided by 2 equals 43 gallons of 2 Brix maple sap to make a gallon of maple syrup. That 2 Brix maple sap, hence it means 2% maple sugar in the sap. Maple syrup needs to be finished to a minimum of 66 Brix or it will ferment and spoil. Processing maple sap into syrup. Maple sap is a perishable product. The faster you process your maple sap as it comes out of the tree, the better maple syrup you will make. The best advice is if it is not boiling, it's spoiling. If sap must be stored, keep the sap at 38 degrees or less, and do not store it more than 24 hours. Time to boil. This here is a really old school boiling method with putting the wood underneath. Here's a newer evaporator with a steam away on top, more advanced. The RO system, many maple producers use an RO system. ROs can take out over 80% of the water. Some new ROs can reach over 18% sugar concentrate. Concern for flavor is cooking time is too short. If people make that concentrate too much, you will not get enough cooking time to caramelize your syrup, and people think the flavor is not as deep. Many RO sizes and options. Use a smaller evaporator to cook high concentrated sap. That being said, With the ROs, people are going to a smaller evaporator. Time to boil. There are many types of heat sources, wood propane, fuel oil. Some of the methods of boiling are a propane boiler, wood fire under a sugar pan, and again, that hobby evaporator. Time to boil. Here's a stainless pan. This here is called a hydrometer cup. You'll see in there is a hydrometer. This shows when your syrup is considered maple syrup. It is at 66.5 Brix. How critical is that measurement? 66 Brix or less, syrup will spoil. 68 and over may generate sugar crystals in the bottle. 1 Brix below 66 syrup sap is very thin and watery. 1 Brix above 67 syrup acquires a thick feel and gives the perception of increased sweetness in it because it stays on the tongue longer. Filtration. Free from turbulation and sediment, free of sugar sand and niter. What is sugar sand or niter? Calcium and magnesium salts of malic acid. These salts form during the evaporation process and precipitate out as their concentration increases. Anytime that syrup is reheated, we can generate niter or sugar sand, typically temps of 200 degrees or more. This sugar sand will not hurt you if you have it in your syrup, but usually it looks nicer, of course, not having that sugar sand in there. What creates the grades of syrup? Lighter grades typically come earlier in the season and have more sucrose sugars, which caramelizes less during cooking. Darker grades have more glucose sugars, which caramelizes more during cooking, creating a stronger, more caramel flavor. You'll see the 4 grades of maple syrup here: golden, amber, dark, and very dark. Here's a nice little thing talking about the grades of syrup. Golden syrup has a delicate taste. Amber syrup as a rich taste. Dark maple syrup with a robust taste, and very dark syrup with a strong taste. So the new grading system was adopted in Wisconsin. You will see golden, amber, dark, and very dark. You normally will not see any more formally grade B, because they actually change all syrup is considered grade A. If you're looking for that grade B, it should be labeled as a very dark. As I just said before, golden took over the light amber name. Amber was the medium amber. Dark, the robust, was the dark amber, and the very dark, strong flavor was grade B syrup. Maple syrup comparison minerals. Maple syrup, they say, is 2 tablespoons equals the same amount of potassium as a banana. You'll see that maple syrup is high in manganese, riboflavin, zinc, magnesium, calcium, potassium. And its calorie count is 216. And then it shows on the slide here the difference from maple syrup to corn syrup to honey, brown sugar, and white sugar. You will see that maple syrup is the highest in minerals. And here's another little thing about maple syrup. Pure maple syrup is a natural and nutritious sweetener and a smart choice as a sweet topping or as a flavorful ingredient in baking and cooking. Maple syrup is 100% natural and unrefined, retaining the inherent nutrient value of sap obtained from the maple tree. Maple syrup is a very good source of minerals, nutrients, and vitamins. And this here is just what was on the last slide. Is maple syrup healthier? Yes, according to many studies. Why? According to the November 13, 2017 issue of Time magazine, maple syrup contains over 40 antioxidants and minerals And compared to some other sweeteners, it is lower in calories. Actually, there are 54 that have been identified. Using maple syrup today. Pure maple syrup contains no preservatives. It's the sap from the tree boiled down into syrup. It can be kept in sealed container indefinitely. Being said, once you open that container, you should be putting it in your refrigerator or freezer. It must be refrigerated after opening to prevent that mold. And yes, it can be put in your freezer for however long period indefinitely. It may form sugar crystals on the inside of the jug. And if syrup is cooked too long, it also could form sugar crystals on the inside of the jug. Those will not hurt you. They're just the hardening of the syrup. Standard maple products. Maple syrup, standard containers. Wisconsin is unique in packing in glass, quarts, and pints. You'll notice Wisconsin maple syrup is in, they call this a decanter bottle. Usually other states put their barbecue sauces in that. Gift bottles, maple sugar, candy, and cream. Specialty products, maple mustard, barbecue sauce, maple cotton candy, maple root beer, flavored syrups, cherry cranberry, organic maple syrup, bourbon maple syrup. People reuse bourbon barrels to age maple syrup. I'm going to show you guys a few products here. This here is a maple root beer using Wisconsin maple syrup in it. Here's that maple cotton candy. So maple cotton candy is a maple sugar and a cane sugar mixture. Here's a maple balsamic. Honey maple vinaigrette. A honey maple syrup. A bourbon maple syrup aged in a bourbon barrel. That's just a few. There's many products. There's maple mustards out there. There's all kinds of stuff that people use maple into. New and developing markets. Developing the current market, according to Market Watch, maple may soon replace pumpkin spice as the taste sensation of Starbucks. Economic reports sales of non-alcoholic maple flavored beverages is up 85%. Alcohol maple flavored drinks up 14%. Maple infused whiskeys and vodkas. People are also, you'll see in microbreweries and wineries starting to use maple. The expansion of current maple syrup market in Europe and Asia, and maple water. So what maple water is, it's maple sap as a product. So what they're using is they're taking the sap from trees and they're making it into a drinkable, packaging it into a drinkable can. They make it in a jug. There's no additives. The market shows large global potential, but it must be stabilized for shelf length. Standards are just being set. And as I said, this is a really fast overview. I want to make sure you guys have lots of time for questions. I'm with the Wisconsin Maple Syrup Producers Association. We have many great ideas and information out there about learning to tap and information. We have this cool little beginner's guide that we give to anybody that would like to learn about making maple syrup. It's a 101 guide, goes from tapping a tree all the way to bottling and filtering. Any questions?
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Teresa. And as we all know, it wouldn't be Science on Tap without a question and answer period. So if you have questions for Teresa, you can use that comment box on YouTube and we'll get started with asking her some questions. We have, would you mind going off of your shared screen? And then we'll get our view there. Great. All right. So our first question for you, Teresa, is there a difference in taste between maple syrups from different areas?
So you will have a different in taste in maple syrup. A lot of your taste comes from your nutrients in the ground and your soils, but your taste can also be from difference in boiling methods, or if people keep their sap too long when they're cooking, or as the season gets later, sometimes you notice a bit bitterness in your sap. So yes, my syrup here in Deep here can taste different than the syrup up in Minocqua. What I say on that is find a syrup that you like and continue with that syrup.
I've liked everyone I've tasted, so lucky me. Another question, does the age of a maple tree affect the concentration of sugar in the sap or the taste of that syrup?
No, it does not. The age does not make a difference in it. Sometimes as it gets older, it may not as produce as much just because the tree is starting to die off, but it should not affect the concentration of the sugar. We have a tree at our sugar bush that is over 100 years old, and that actually has our highest sugar content when it comes to tapping. And but it's,
Wow.
of course, it's our biggest tree too.
Great. Is climate change affecting the distribution of sugar maples around Wisconsin?
So with the climate change, it seems that seasons are starting earlier and becoming shorter. So yes, it is affecting that distribution of sugar maple trees.
Mm. Can you taste the difference between the wood-fired and the gas-fired evaporators?
This is one of those questions, I have to say that's kind of an oxymoron question. You should not be able to taste, if you're using a sealed evaporator system, you should not be able to taste the difference between wood-fired and gas-fired. But if you're cooking it on an open pan and that smoke is rolling up, yes, you would taste the difference in the wood-fired because you taste the smoke into it. We have a wood-fired evaporator. We finish off on propane. The reason we finish off on propane is we can cut that heat source, but you cannot tell from our evaporator because it's a sealed system. The wood's going underneath. It's not an open pan system. You cannot tell the difference in that or a gas-fired.
All right. How has using tubes to collect sap changed the industry?
It's made it a lot less labor intense. And what vacuums people are getting, pulling more sap out of the trees. It's not hurting the trees. I think it has made the industry expand because the physical labor isn't so hard, because you leave those tubing systems up from year to year. You still have to go back and do maintenance on them, but you don't have to carry those pails to that. Usually on a tubing system, you put 150 to 200 taps on a system. So I think it's changed the industry that I think more people are going to that way.
Okay. Can you recommend a source of information, example like something on social media, on the status of spring sap run around the state, like when that starts in different areas? Do people report that?
I would just watch your Facebook pages. The Wisconsin Maple Syrup Producers Association has a Facebook page. Wisconsin Maple Producers has a Facebook page. And also there is I don't have it sitting in front of me, but there's a website that talks about the temperatures throughout the state and when to tap, but I don't have that in front of me. So.
Okay. But that is once the nights are 24 degrees?
Once the days are above 32. You want it to be below 32 at night, above 32 during the day.
Got it. All right. Let's see. How long is your tubing season compared to buckets?
Honestly, the tubing and the season and buckets is pretty much the same. It runs the same season.
How do they store syrup in bourbon barrels? Can they be sealed like a bottle or a barrel?
So usually when a person puts syrup into a bourbon barrel, they put it in hot into the bourbon barrel and they seal it as soon as they're putting in. So you're getting it as if you were canning it at that 190, 195 degrees. they cap it. And then what they do is when it sits for, some people leave it for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. Then when they open that up, they put it and bottle it right away. So to preserve that back. So
Got it. How does the RO system affect the taste?
if a person is cooking or is putting their sap down to the right concentrate, it shouldn't affect the taste. But if you concentrate it too high, it may not get cooked as long, and it could make it not have as deep of a maple taste just because it's not cooking and caramelizing as long.
Okay. Can you cook a small batch on your kitchen stove?
You can. The only thing I say about that, when we were younger, we did that. So it's creating moisture in the air. It will peel your paint and stuff on your walls. So I guess if you had a vent that would have it run, I would advise you, if you want to cook a small batch, maybe cook it outside on a turkey fryer. Not, of course, anything that you had oil in, because sap will pick up, or maple will pick up any taste that it was in. So you could use a turkey fryer, or some people use like lasagna pans, just a stainless pan. But again, whatever you're cooking that sap in, your sap is going to take the taste on. So
Okay. I have some friends who start outside with a big pan, and then once it's down to some level of concentration, they finish it off on their kitchen stove.
in my parents' house, and let's see, I would say they stopped cooking in the house probably 30 years ago. You still cannot paint over that spot from all the condensation that was bubbled on the paint. So I would advise, if you were going to cook it in your house, I would do that. Yeah, cook it outside and get it as low as you can before you bring it in.
Got it. How do I know if I'm buying pure maple syrup? A vendor once told me that maple syrup is often cut with something else like corn syrup.
So in the state of Wisconsin, syrup cannot be labeled pure maple syrup unless it is pure maple syrup. So it cannot have any additives in the back. I would check your label. Even the flavored maple syrup should not be labeled pure maple syrup, because it's not a pure maple product anymore. So you'll notice look on that ingredient level, or that ingredient list on the back. It should tell you if they are putting corn syrup into their maple syrup, it has to be on the back on that label.
Thanks.
If it's properly labeled.
Right. Should you tap as soon as you have one day above 32 degrees, or do you wait to see if you have so many days in a row above 32 degrees?
That really depends on your system. If you're tapping tubing system or pail system, I personally would wait till you had a couple days in a row, because it could be 32 degrees for a day and it'll shut down for a week, if it doesn't get above that 32. So I would wait on until you at least have a couple days in a row. I know we have some beautiful weather here coming up, but a maple season actually averages about 28 days. So from cook to or start to finish. So
okay. Is bacteria more problematic in tubing systems or bags or pails, or is it the same all across all those systems?
the big thing is, when you are cleaning up your stuff, your tubing, your bags, your pails, you need to make sure you're cleaning them with hot water, or a product that is for cleaning them. If you don't clean your tubing good, we back flush it with hot water. If you don't clean that tubing good, yes, it can get bacteria in. Or if you don't clean your pails good, it can get bacteria in. If you use soap and water, again, that could take on the taste of that pail. The soap could taste in that pail. And when you cook the sap down, you could maybe taste that, will taste that syrup, or any. If you use bleach, you could taste that in your syrup when you're cooking it down.
So you just use straight up hot water to clean them?
We use straight up hot water.
Okay, got it. Another question, do the taps hurt the trees? Is there any sign they grow more slowly if they've been tapped?
If properly tapped, they don't hurt the trees. I'm going to show you something. So here is, I don't know if everybody can see, here is the trees healing. If you look here, and so they are not hurting the trees. It will naturally heal up. One thing, a lot of people in the maple industry have gone to the smaller tap because you're putting a smaller hole into the tree. It will heal faster, but both are adequate in the tree.
So as a follow-up to that, do you ever have a circumstance where you can no longer tap a tree because you made it around the whole circumference?
You should be able to tap if you go, as long as you're going that star away from that old tap hole, you know,
Okay.
up or down, because you don't tap necessarily at the same tapping spot each year. A big joke for us is when we were younger, of course, we tapped lower. As we got older, you tapped to the height of the people tapping. As the kids were younger, you tapped lower so they could reach the pails, and higher. It really doesn't matter how high you tap. But of course, on a tubing system with gravity flow, of course, you'd have to have that natural gravity down.
Sure. Right. Is it true that if sap is shipped to another state, it is considered syrup from that finishing state?
It is. So sap, if it's transferred, it would be considered, say sap was in Michigan, it's considered that you would have to have your Wisconsin sap processing and your Michigan processing. It should be Wisconsin sap, you know, Wisconsin syrup, Michigan syrup. But I know with the borderline, there is, that does happen. I can give a look into it a little bit more if they want on that, a little bit more of an answer.
Thanks. Another question. I understand that some people sell sap to larger producers to boil. What is the going rate for sap?
Well, each year it changes. So I do not know what this year's sap rate is. Yes, many producers do sell sap, quite a few throughout the state, just because then they don't need the evaporator and stuff. And a lot of maple producers throughout the state of Wisconsin will buy sap. So.
Okay. Have you ever scorched a pan, and how did you clean it?
Yes, we have scorched a pan. We've scorched, we actually couldn't clean the one we scorched. We scorched it really bad and actually burned through. So you could use sap, you could use, I know some people will take a grinder and grind it out, but you have to be really careful on that if you would use something like that. It depends how much you scorch it. You could try putting sap in it, and it'll turn back to water, and that kind of helps clean out, kind of like cleaning at the end of season. So that would be something you could use too.
Okay. Let's see. I don't have a filter press. I use an Orlon bag with pre-filters. So how many pre-filters should I stack together with the Orlon bag to give the best results? Oh, I can't hear you, Teresa. Yes, yes.
Okay. On that question, I don't know exactly the how many that you stack together with an Orlon bag. Some people use just that Orlon bag. The big thing is make sure your syrup is hot when you're putting it in there.
Okay. Are there ways that syrup becomes contaminated during processing, and what are the highest risk times?
So the way that syrup would become contaminated is if you're not putting it into a clean bottle, you're not boiling it to that, or heating it back up to that 190 and 195. It shouldn't come contaminated if you're doing those proper things, like say clean container, and you're putting it into your canning it at that 190 to 195.
Okay. How do you handle metabolism off flavor syrup?
So many people for off flavored metabolism, they'll either mix it with a good syrup just at a lower ratio, or some people use that metabolism flavored syrup as for their cooking. A lot of your larger producers that buy syrup, they'll take that off flavor into a ratio, mixing it so it actually will dull out that metabolism.
Okay. Have you ever tapped birch? And if so, which ones? Paper birch or yellow birch? And how did it taste?
So I've never tapped birch. I've been to a couple birch operations. It has a bitter taste compared to maple. It kind of tastes like the box elder when you use that for tapping that as for maple. The thing that you don't see many people tap birch trees is because it takes 80 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of birch syrup. So it is big in Alaska, birches, and it's starting to get bigger and bigger in Wisconsin, because what happens is maple's almost done and the birch trees start to run. So
Interesting. All right.
It's an acquired taste, I should say, when it comes to the taste of it.
Okay, great, thanks. I think we have a couple more questions here. Let's see. Do we? Okay, yes. So, are there different maple tree species that are tapped in Europe or other places in the world?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I know here we have black, we have sugar, we have silver and red maples. So, and those are usually the maples tap, but like I said, you can tap the box elder as well. So.
Right. Great. It looks like the syrup grading system has changed in recent years. Can you comment on this?
Yes, it actually has changed. When I say there's no grade B, it was changed to all considered grade A. So now it has that golden, amber, dark, and very dark. It is more for people to, so if I'm going here and I'm buying, amber syrup in, say, New York, I'm getting the same, it's supposed to be the same taste, the taste will taste a little different, but it's the same components of what it should be in that.
Got it. Let's see. Michelle Obama once proposed new labeling rules, and as part of that, maple syrup would have to say that sugar was added even though it was not. Do you know whatever became of those rules?
Yes, the Wisconsin Maple Syrup Producers Association worked back and forth with other maple producing states. So what they took off that we had to add added sugar, but you still have to put total sugars on the back when it comes to a label. And so we don't have to write it was added sugar, you just have to put total sugars. From a sales perspective, it made it that added sugars really made it like you were adding something into that product. So
Sure.
you'll notice the new nutrition labels will say total sugars, not added sugars.
Thanks.
And that's the same for honey, so as well. Honey had to follow the same rules.
Is it safe to use an additive that reduces foam when boiling?
Yes, as long as you're using one that is not an allergen. So you're not using butter, you're not using oil. You're using anything that is not allergen forming. People used to put eggs in their syrup to make it not boil. That is bad. That's an allergen. So yes, it is safe. And many people, many different equipment dealers have it. It's called a defoamer. It's usually $3-4 for a bottle of it.
Okay.
But too much defoamer can be a bad thing too. So you really have to watch how much you're putting in.
Got it. We have one final question for the evening. Oh, two final questions. The first one, when will you start watching the sap run? In the next couple of weeks?
I would think the sap should be running. Of course, this is Mother Nature telling us when it runs. It should be running the way the weather outlook looks in the next, probably that third week of February. But again, it's going to matter. It's going to be different throughout where you are in the state.
And one last question for you, Teresa. What is your favorite maple syrup product from Wisconsin to consume?
My favorite is the maple bourbon syrup. It makes a really good maple old fashioned and
Oh,
kitty cocktails. So
I gotta try this. Do I get some of that from Into Pier next time
you
I'm
can get
around there?
some of that. Yeah.
Great.
It's taken over the old fashions. Maple old fashions, you'll find them in your local bars and stuff, like supper clubs.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much to Teresa, and thanks to everyone who participated, especially those who wrote in questions, and to our partners, the Lakeland Badger chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, Minocqua Public Library, UW Kemp Natural Resources Station, UW Trout Lake Station, the Brittingham Foundation, WXPR Public Radio, and Oak Fire Pizza. Remember that our next Science on Tap is on March 2nd, and we will see you right back here online for that event. And if you'd like to sign up for any email reminders for our events, you can go to our website at scienceontapminocqua.org and click contact us and leave us your email address. And with that, we will see you next month. Thanks again, Teresa.